It was supposed to be a perfect Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where you forget about work, responsibilities, and everything that weighs on your shoulders during the week. Judge Amara Williams had been looking forward to this day for weeks. No black robes, no courtroom drama, no heavy decisions that could change someone's life forever. Just her, some shopping bags, and a few hours of peace in the city's nicest shopping district. She stepped out of the boutique with a satisfied smile on her face. The silk scarf she'd just bought was perfect. Her sister's birthday was coming up, and finding the right gift always felt like a small victory. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and for once she felt like just another person enjoying a beautiful day. Not Judge Williams, not the woman who'd spent 15 years behind the bench, just Amara. The shopping district was busy, as it always was on weekends. Families strolled by with ice cream cones. Couples window shopped hand in hand. The outdoor cafes were packed with people laughing over coffee and pastries. Everything felt normal, safe, comfortable. That feeling lasted exactly 3 more minutes. Amara was checking her phone, thinking about where to grab lunch, when she noticed 2 police officers walking straight toward her. Not past her, toward her. Their eyes were locked on her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. She'd seen that look before, countless times, but always from the other side, always in her courtroom when officers testified about suspects they'd arrested. She'd never been on the receiving end of that look. "Excuse me, ma'am," the first officer said. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with a stern expression that seemed permanently carved into his face. His name tag read Davis. "We need to have a word with you." Amara stopped, her shopping bags hanging from her hands. "Is there a problem, officer?" "We've had reports of shoplifting in this area," Officer Davis said, his tone leaving no room for friendliness. "We need to see your receipts and some identification." For a moment, Amara thought she'd misheard him. She glanced around, wondering if he was talking to someone else. But no, both officers were staring directly at her. The second officer, whose badge identified him as Martinez, had his hand resting casually on his belt close to his handcuffs. "I'm sorry." "What?" Amara kept her voice calm, professional. Years of dealing with difficult situations in the courtroom had taught her to never let emotions take control. "Are you accusing me of something?" "We're not accusing anyone of anything," Martinez said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We're just doing our job. Now, are you going to cooperate? Or do we need to make this difficult?" Amara felt heat rising in her chest. She knew exactly what was happening. She'd read about it, seen statistics about it, even ruled on cases involving it. But knowing about racial profiling in the abstract was completely different from experiencing it in real time, in public, with dozens of people starting to notice the commotion. "Of course I'll cooperate," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I have receipts for everything I purchased. I'm a paying customer and I haven't done anything wrong." She reached into her purse to pull out the receipt from the boutique, but Officer Davis stepped closer, his posture aggressive. "Slowly," he warned. "Keep your hands where we can see them." People were stopping now. A small crowd was beginning to form at a distance, watching the scene unfold. Amara could feel their eyes on her. Some looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to help but didn't know how. A few were already pulling out their phones. She produced the receipt and held it out. Officer Davis barely glanced at it. "That's one bag. What about the others?" "They're from other stores. I can show you those receipts too." Amara's patience was wearing thin, but she forced herself to remain calm. Getting angry would only make things worse. That was the trap. Stay calm and you're suspicious. Get upset and you're threatening. "We need to search your bags," Martinez said. "Right here. You want to search my bags? In the middle of the street?" Amara looked around at the growing crowd. "I've shown you my receipt. I've offered to show you all of them. What probable cause do you have for a search?" The moment she said probable cause, both officers' expressions hardened. Davis crossed his arms. "So you're a lawyer now? You think you know the law better than us?" "I'm simply asking what your justification is for searching my personal belongings in public," Amara replied. She could feel her heart pounding, but she kept her face neutral. "I've committed no crime. You have no reason to detain me." "We have reports," Davis insisted. "That's all the reason we need. Now you can let us look in those bags voluntarily, or we can do this the hard way." The hard way. Amara knew what that meant. Handcuffs. Being forced against a patrol car. Complete and total humiliation in front of everyone watching. And for what? For shopping while black? For having the audacity to exist in an upscale neighborhood on a Saturday afternoon? A woman from the boutique came rushing out, slightly out of breath. Officers, excuse me. That woman just made a purchase in our store. I helped her myself. She paid for everything. There's no problem here. Officer Davis didn't even look at her. We'll determine if there's a problem, ma'am. Please step back. The boutique employee looked at Amara with apologetic eyes before retreating. At least she'd tried. But it was clear these officers had already made up their minds about who Amara was and what she represented to them. This is ridiculous, Amara said, her voice still controlled but with an edge of frustration creeping in. I'm a professional. I live in this city. I shop here regularly. You're treating me like a criminal based on absolutely nothing. We're treating you like someone who's refusing to cooperate, Martinez shot back. Which makes us wonder what you're hiding. The circular logic was maddening. Don't cooperate and you're guilty. Cooperate and you're still guilty because why would an innocent person need to prove their innocence? It was a game rigged from the start, and Amara had seen it played out hundreds of times in her courtroom. She'd always tried to be fair, to see both sides, to understand the pressures officers faced on the job. But right now, standing in the middle of a crowded shopping district being treated like a suspect for no reason other than the color of her skin, all of that understanding evaporated. This wasn't about difficult jobs or split-second decisions. This was about two officers who saw a black woman with shopping bags and assumed the worst. More people were gathering now. Some were recording on their phones. Others whispered to each other. A few looked angry on her behalf. But no one stepped in. No one challenged the officers. They just watched, the way people always watched when something uncomfortable happened in public. Officer Davis pulled out his handcuffs, letting them dangle from his hand like a threat. Last chance. Either you let us search those bags right now or we're taking you in for obstruction. Amara looked at those handcuffs. She looked at the crowd. She looked at the two officers who had decided her guilt before they'd even spoken to her, and she made a decision. She'd given them every opportunity to de-escalate. She'd been calm, respectful, and compliant. But enough was enough. It was time to show them exactly who they were dealing with. The handcuffs caught the sunlight, glinting like a warning. Amara stared at them, her mind racing through 1,000 thoughts at once. She'd seen handcuffs used countless times in her courtroom. She'd watched bailiffs snap them onto convicted criminals, onto people who'd actually broken the law. Never in her worst nightmares had she imagined them being threatened against her own wrists for the crime of shopping. "You're going to handcuff me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "For what exactly?" Officer Davis took a step closer, invading her personal space in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. "For refusing to comply with a lawful order. Now, are we going to do this the easy way or the hard way?" The crowd had grown larger. At least 30 people were watching now. Maybe more. Some had their phones held high, recording every second. Others whispered to each other, their faces showing everything from shock to uncomfortable recognition. A few people looked like they wanted to intervene but were too afraid to challenge the police. Amara could feel the weight of all those eyes on her. This was what humiliation felt like. Pure public humiliation. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because these two officers had decided she looked like trouble. And in their minds, trouble wore brown skin and carried shopping bags from stores they probably thought she couldn't afford. "Officers, please." Amara tried one more time, her voice calm but firm. "I've shown you my receipt. The store employee confirmed I'm a customer. I haven't broken any laws. This is harassment, and you know it." Harassment. Martinez laughed, actually laughed like she'd just told a joke. "Lady, you don't know what harassment is. We're doing our jobs. Maybe if people like you didn't make such a big deal out of everything, these situations wouldn't escalate. People like you." There it was. The phrase that confirmed everything Amara already knew. This wasn't about shoplifting reports or probable cause or public safety. This was about two officers who saw a black woman and assumed she was a problem that needed solving. "Put your hands on the vehicle," Davis ordered, gesturing toward their patrol car parked nearby. "We're going to conduct a search whether you like it or not." Something inside Amara cracked. Not broke, but cracked, like ice on a frozen lake when the temperature starts to rise. She'd spent her entire career playing by the rules. She'd worked twice as hard as her colleagues to prove she belonged on the bench. She'd swallowed countless microaggressions, Subtle slights and moments of casual racism with grace and professionalism. She'd told herself that dignity meant taking the high road, that responding with calm would eventually change minds, but right now, being ordered to assume the position like a common criminal, while dozens of strangers watched and recorded, dignity felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Her hands were shaking slightly as she tightened her grip on her shopping bags. Not from fear, from rage, from the accumulated weight of every time someone had looked at her and seen a threat instead of a human being. Every time she'd been followed in a store. Every time someone clutched their purse tighter when she walked by. Every time she'd been asked if she was lost when entering a nice restaurant or exclusive event. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again," Davis said, his voice rising. The edge of aggression was sharper now, more pronounced. "Hands on the vehicle, now." A young man in the crowd called out, "She didn't do anything." "Just leave her alone." Martinez spun around, pointing at the young man. "You want to be next? Back up and mind your business." The young man fell silent, but his phone was still recording. So were a dozen others. Amara realized that whatever happened next would be documented, shared, analyzed. Part of her wanted to just comply, to let them search her bags and get it over with, to avoid making a scene, to be the bigger person. But another part of her, the part that had fought for every achievement in her life, refused to bend. Why should she make this easy for them? Why should she help them violate her rights just to make herself seem less threatening? "I'm not putting my hands on your vehicle," Amara said clearly, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I have broken no laws. You have no probable cause. And what you're doing right now is a violation of my civil rights." Davis's jaw clenched. His face was turning red, whether from anger or embarrassment at being challenged in front of so many witnesses. Amara couldn't tell. "Maybe both. You're making this so much worse for yourself," he said. "All we want to do is check your bags. Why are you being so difficult? Why are you profiling me?" Amara shot back. The words came out before she could stop them, but she didn't regret them. "I want you to tell me, right now in front of all these people. Why did you stop me? What did I do that made you think I was a criminal? Was it my clothes, my hair? Or was it just my skin color?" The crowd murmured. Several people nodded in agreement. Someone called out, "Answer her question." Martinez stepped between Davis and Amara, holding up his hands like he was trying to de-escalate. But his words betrayed his true intentions. Nobody said anything about race. "You're the one making this about race. We got a call about suspicious activity in the area, and we're following up. That's it. That's all this is." "What suspicious activity?" Amara pressed. "Specifically, what did this person allegedly look like? What were they wearing? What store were they in? Because I haven't heard any details. Just vague claims about reports that conveniently justify stopping the only black woman shopping alone in this entire district." She could see it in their faces, the realization that this wasn't going the way they'd expected. Most people, when confronted by police, either complied immediately or got angry and made mistakes. Amara was doing neither. She was calm, articulate, and asking questions they couldn't answer. Questions that exposed the holes in their story. The woman from the boutique had come back out, this time with the manager. "Officers, we've checked our inventory," the manager said. "Nothing is missing. This woman is a regular customer. There's no reason to detain her." Davis barely glanced at them. "We'll determine that. Stay back, please." But the manager didn't stay back. She moved closer, her voice firm. "I'm telling you that she's innocent. You're harassing one of our best customers. If you don't stop, I'm calling your supervisor." "Call whoever you want," Martinez snapped. "We're conducting an investigation." An elderly gentleman in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd. "Young lady," he said to Amara, "I'm an attorney. Would you like me to stay as a witness?" Before Amara could answer, Davis whirled on him. "Sir, step back. This is police business." "This is a public street," the attorney replied coolly. "I have every right to observe. And what I'm observing looks an awful lot like racial profiling." The situation was spiraling. More people were getting involved. More phones were recording. Voices in the crowd were getting louder, some defending the officers, but most questioning why this was happening at all. Amara felt tears threatening to form, but she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She would not give these officers the satisfaction of seeing her break down, but the emotional toll was crushing. This was exhausting in a way that physical labor could never be. The constant vigilance, the need to remain calm while being treated like garbage. The knowledge that one wrong move, one moment of justified anger, could be twisted into justification for violence against her. Officer Davis grabbed her arm, not gently. "That's it. You're coming with us. You can explain yourself at the station." The crowd erupted. People shouted. Someone yelled about calling a lawyer. The boutique manager was on her phone, presumably calling the police department. The elderly attorney stepped even closer, loudly stating his bar number and announcing he was serving as counsel. And through it all, Amara made a decision. She'd been patient. She'd been respectful. She'd followed every rule, answered every question, and shown every receipt they'd demanded. And it still wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Because in their eyes, she would always be guilty of something, even if that something was just existing in a space they thought she didn't belong. Her purse was still on her shoulder. Inside it was her wallet, and inside that wallet was a small piece of identification that was about to change everything. She just had to reach it. But the way Davis was gripping her arm, his partner moving to her other side, she knew this had to be done carefully. Very carefully. Amara's arm throbbed where Officer Davis was gripping it. His fingers dug into her skin hard enough to leave marks. She could feel every eye in the crowd on her, could hear the murmur of voices rising and falling like waves. Some people were arguing with each other now. A woman was crying. Someone was yelling about calling the news. This was it, the moment where everything could go terribly wrong. She'd seen the statistics. She knew how these situations could end. A sudden movement, a misunderstanding, an officer who felt threatened, and then a life changed forever, or worse, a life ended. But she also knew that staying silent, letting them arrest her, letting them continue this humiliation, would accomplish nothing. They'd take her to the station, search her belongings, waste hours of her time, and eventually let her go when they found nothing. And they'd never face consequences for what they'd done. They'd go home and tell themselves they were just doing their jobs, that she was difficult, that she made it about race when it was really about procedure. No, not this time. "I need to reach into my purse," Amara said loudly, clearly, making sure everyone could hear her. "I'm going to get my identification. I'm moving slowly. My hand is going into my purse right now." She narrated every movement like she was defusing a bomb. In a way, she was. Davis's grip on her arm tightened, but he didn't stop her. Martinez's hand moved closer to his weapon, hovering there like a threat. The crowd had gone almost silent, watching. The elderly attorney moved even closer, his phone out and recording. "I'm documenting everything," he announced. "Continue, ma'am. You have every right to identify yourself." Amara's fingers found her wallet. It was a leather bifold worn soft from years of use. Inside were the usual things: credit cards, a photo of her family, her driver's license, and 2 other cards that most people never had to think about. Cards that represented decades of education, sacrifice, and achievement. Cards that shouldn't matter in a situation like this, but somehow in this broken system they did. She pulled out the wallet slowly, deliberately. Her hands were shaking now, and she couldn't tell if it was from anger, fear, or the adrenaline coursing through her body. Probably all 3. She opened the wallet and carefully extracted 2 cards, holding them between her fingers. "Officer Davis," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Officer Martinez, I want you to look at these very carefully." She held up the first card. It was her state bar card, the one that proved she was a licensed attorney. The gold seal caught the sunlight. Her name was embossed across the top in raised letters. Martinez squinted at it, his expression confused. Davis barely looked at it. "So you're a lawyer," he said dismissively. "That doesn't change anything. Lawyers can shoplift too." "Look at the second card," Amara said. Her voice was quieter now, but there was steel in it. Authority, the same tone she used in her courtroom when making a ruling that couldn't be appealed. She held up the judicial identification card. It was smaller than the bar card, but more significant. The state seal was prominent at the top. Below it, her photograph. And beneath that, the words that changed everything. Judge Amara Williams, 5th District Court. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The color drained from Officer Martinez's face like someone had pulled a plug. His hand dropped from his belt. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No words came out. Davis released her arm so quickly it was like she'd suddenly become electrically charged. He took a step back, his eyes wide, flicking from the ID card to her face and back again. "You're a judge?" His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "I am Judge Amara Williams of the 5th District Court," she said clearly, still holding the ID up for everyone to see. "And you've just racially profiled, harassed, and publicly humiliated a sitting judge in front of dozens of witnesses." The crowd erupted. People gasped. Someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Others started talking all at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of shock and vindication. The elderly attorney actually laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. "Gentlemen," he said to the officers, "you have made a catastrophic mistake." Martinez was stammering now, his professional composure completely shattered. "Judge Williams, we were just what?" Amara cut him off. Her voice was like ice. "Just doing your job? Just following up on reports? Just randomly stopping a black woman and demanding to search her belongings without probable cause? Which part of that was just doing your job?" Davis tried to salvage the situation, but his voice lacked any real conviction. "Your Honor, this was all a misunderstanding. We received a call about suspicious activity in the area, and we were following standard procedures." "Standard procedures," Amara repeated. She looked around at the crowd, then back at the officers. "Tell me, Officer Davis, how many white women have you stopped and searched in this shopping district today? This week? This month?" Silence. Davis's jaw worked, but no answer came. "That's what I thought," Amara said. She lowered her ID cards but didn't put them away. "Let me explain something to both of you. I've been a judge for 15 years. I've presided over thousands of cases. I've heard testimony from hundreds of police officers. I know what probable cause looks like. I know what reasonable suspicion is. And I know what racial profiling is. What you did here today was textbook discrimination." Martinez was shaking his head frantically, like he could somehow undo the last 20 minutes. "Your Honor, please, we didn't know who you were. If you'd known I was a judge, you wouldn't have stopped me." Amara's voice rose. "That's your defense? That you only harass and humiliate people you think don't have power? That you only violate the rights of people you think can't fight back?" The boutique manager stepped forward, emboldened now. "I told you she was a customer. I showed you our records. You didn't care. You were determined to treat her like a criminal no matter what anyone said." Other people in the crowd started speaking up. A man said he'd watched the whole thing, and the officers never asked about any specific suspect or description. A woman said she'd been shopping here for years and had never seen police stop anyone, white or black, without clear cause. A teenager said his older brother had been stopped by these same officers last month for looking suspicious while waiting for his mom outside a store. The narrative was falling apart around the officers, and they knew it. Every excuse, every justification was being dismantled by witnesses who'd seen the truth with their own eyes. Davis tried one more time, his voice desperate now. "Your Honor, we were responding to a legitimate call. We had no way of knowing—" "Stop." Amara held up her hand. "Just stop. You had the store employee tell you I was a paying customer. You had my receipts. You had multiple witnesses saying I'd done nothing wrong. But none of that mattered to you, did it? Because you'd already decided I was guilty. You'd already decided that a black woman with shopping bags in an upscale district must be a criminal." She pulled out her phone, her movements deliberate. "I'm going to need both of your badge numbers. Your full names. And the name and contact information for your supervising officer." Martinez looked like he might be sick. "Your Honor, please—" "Badge numbers," Amara repeated. "Now." The elderly attorney stepped closer, his own phone still recording. "I'm Attorney Harold Chen," he said. "I've witnessed this entire incident, and I'm prepared to testify to everything I've seen. Your Honor, I'd also like to offer my services if you need additional legal support for whatever action you choose to pursue." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Amara said. She looked back at the officers. "I'm still waiting for those badge numbers." Davis recited his number first, his voice barely above a whisper. Martinez followed, stumbling over the digits like he'd forgotten his own identification. Amara typed them into her phone, her fingers steady now. The shaking had stopped. In its place was a cold, clear anger. The kind of anger that didn't explode or shout. The kind that planned and calculated and followed through. "Let me be very clear about what happens next," she said. "I'm filing a formal complaint with your department. I'm requesting a full investigation into your conduct. And I'm going to make sure that what happened here today doesn't just disappear. Because if this could happen to me, a judge, someone with power and credentials and connections, what happens to everyone else? What happens to the people who don't have a title to protect them? She looked at the crowd, at all the phones still recording, at the faces that ranged from shocked to angry to grimly satisfied. You all saw what happened here. You all witnessed it. Don't let anyone tell you this was just a misunderstanding or a simple mistake. This was profiling. This was discrimination. And it happens every single day to people who look like me. Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of people were applauding, the sound echoing off the storefronts around them. Some were cheering. Others were calling out words of support. The officers stood frozen, trapped in a nightmare of their own making. Their careers, their reputations, everything they'd worked for, crumbling around them because they'd made one fatal assumption. They'd assumed she was powerless. The videos started appearing online before Amara even made it home. By the time she pulled into her driveway, her phone was buzzing constantly. Text messages, emails, calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her sister had sent her 5 messages in a row, each one more frantic than the last. Are you okay? I saw the video! Call me now. Amara sat in her car for a moment, engine off, just breathing. Her hands were still gripping the steering wheel even though she wasn't going anywhere. The adrenaline from the confrontation was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion that felt like it went all the way to her bones. She looked down at her arm where Officer Davis had grabbed her. Red marks were already forming into bruises. Evidence. Proof. As if the dozen videos circulating online weren't enough. Her phone rang again. This time it was her husband. She answered. Amara, thank God. Are you all right? I just saw. Honey, what happened? His voice was tight with worry and anger. I'm okay, she said, though she wasn't sure that was true. I'm home. I just need a minute. I'm leaving work right now. Don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she didn't argue. She just sat there in her car, watching her phone light up with notification after notification. Someone had posted the video on Twitter, then Facebook, then Instagram, each platform spreading it further, faster, like wildfire jumping from tree to tree. By the time she finally went inside, hashtags were already forming. Judge Williams, Justice for Judge Williams, racial profiling. The videos had been viewed thousands of times. Thousands became tens of thousands. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands. She turned on her television and immediately saw her own face staring back at her. The local news had picked up the story. They were showing clips from the videos. The moment she held up her judicial ID, the officers' faces draining of color. The anchor's voice was grave as she explained that a sitting judge had been racially profiled by police officers in broad daylight. Amara's husband came through the door like a hurricane, dropping his briefcase and immediately pulling her into his arms. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, she said into his shoulder. But then her voice cracked. I'm fine, she wasn't fine. The tears she'd held back during the entire confrontation finally came, and once they started, she couldn't stop them. She cried for herself, for the humiliation, for every time she'd been made to feel less than because of her skin color. But she also cried for everyone who'd experienced the same thing without a title to protect them, for everyone who didn't have a judicial ID to flash, for everyone whose videos never went viral, whose stories never got told. Her husband held her, letting her cry, his own anger radiating through his body. We're suing them, he said. The department, the city, everyone. They can't do this to you. They can't do this to anyone. The phone rang again, and again, and again. News outlets wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations wanted to offer support. Fellow judges were calling to express their outrage. Friends were checking in. Even people she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. By evening, the story had gone national. Major news networks were covering it. Cable news shows were debating it. Social media had exploded with opinions from every direction. Most people were outraged on her behalf, sharing the videos with comments about systemic racism and police accountability. But others were already trying to justify what happened, saying the officers were just doing their jobs, that Amara had made it worse by not complying immediately. That last group of comments stung the most. The idea that she should have just submitted to an illegal search to make things easier. That she should have been grateful they didn't arrest her. That she should have shown her ID immediately instead of exercising her constitutional rights. Her phone buzzed with a call from a private number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Judge Williams, this is Chief Raymond Burke from the Metropolitan Police Department. I want to personally apologize for what happened to you today. This is not representative of our department or our values. Amara's grip tightened on the phone. Chief Burke, with all due respect, this is exactly representative of your department. This happens all the time. The only difference is that this time it happened to someone with power. There was a pause on the other end. I understand you're upset? Upset? Amara's voice was sharp now. Chief, I was publicly humiliated, threatened with arrest, and physically grabbed by your officers for the crime of shopping while black. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. We're launching an immediate investigation, the chief said quickly. Both officers have been placed on administrative leave pending review. We take these allegations very seriously. You take them seriously because I'm a judge and it's on video, Amara shot back. What about all the times it's not on video? What about all the people who file complaints that go nowhere? What about the systematic pattern of discrimination that everyone knows exists but nobody does anything about? Another pause. Judge Williams, I'd like to meet with you personally to discuss this situation and how we can move forward. Would you be willing to come to my office? Amara almost laughed. You want me to come to the police station? After what your officers just did to me? No, Chief. If you want to talk, you can come to the courthouse. On the record. With witnesses present, she hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it was pure anger. Administrative leave. An investigation. The standard response that meant nothing would really change. The officers would get a slap on the wrist, maybe some retraining, and then they'd be back on the streets doing the same thing to someone else. Her sister called. Then her mother. Then her best friend from law school. Everyone wanted to know if she was okay. Everyone was outraged. Everyone wanted justice. But Amara knew how this story usually ended. A few weeks of attention, some empty promises about reform, maybe a settlement to make her go away quietly, and then everything would return to normal. Except she didn't want normal. Normal was the problem. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed scrolling through social media, reading comment after comment. Some made her smile. Others made her want to throw her phone across the room. But one comment stuck with her from a young black woman who wrote, "If this can happen to a judge, what chance do the rest of us have?" That question haunted her through the sleepless hours. What chance did they have? How many people had been stopped, searched, humiliated, arrested, or worse without anyone caring? How many videos never got shared? How many complaints were filed and ignored? How many lives were impacted by officers who saw certain people as automatically suspicious? By sunrise, Amara had made a decision. She wasn't going to let this fade away. She wasn't going to accept an apology and move on. She wasn't going to take a settlement that came with a non-disclosure agreement. This moment had chosen her whether she wanted it or not, and she was going to use it. She called her assistant at 7 in the morning. I need you to schedule a press conference for today. As soon as possible. Contact every major news outlet. I'm making a statement. Her husband looked at her from across the kitchen table. Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. You'll be in the spotlight. Every decision you make will be scrutinized. They'll come after you. Let them come, Amara said. I've spent my entire career trying to be the model minority. The judge who never made waves. The one who proved she belonged by being twice as good and half as controversial. And you know what? It didn't matter. I still got treated like a criminal in broad daylight. So if speaking up makes me controversial, so be it. The press conference was set for 2 o'clock that afternoon. By noon, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, cameras, and community members who'd heard she was making a statement. Some held signs supporting her. Others were there simply to witness what would happen next. Amara stood in front of the mirror in her chambers, adjusting her jacket. She'd chosen to wear her judicial robes, not to hide behind them, but to remind everyone watching that this wasn't just about her. It was about the system, about justice, about the gap between what the law promised and what it actually delivered. Her clerk knocked softly. Judge Williams, they're ready for you. Amara took a deep breath. She thought about all the people watching, about the young black woman's comment, about everyone who'd ever been profiled, harassed, or worse, about the officers who thought they could get away with it because they always had before. She thought about the easy path, accepting the apology, taking whatever settlement they offered, going back to her quiet life and pretending it never happened. Then she thought about the right path, the harder one, The one that might cost her something but could change things for people she'd never meet. "Okay," she said. "Let's do this." She walked out of her chambers, down the courthouse hallway toward the doors that led to the steps where dozens of cameras waited. Each step felt heavy with significance. Each step took her further from the comfortable anonymity she'd enjoyed before. Each step moved her closer to becoming something she'd never wanted to be. A symbol. A catalyst. A voice for people who'd been silenced too long. The doors opened. Light flooded in. Cameras flashed. Voices called out questions all at once. Amara stepped forward into the chaos, her head held high, ready to tell her truth and demand something better. Not just for herself, but for everyone who came after her. The time for staying quiet was over. The courthouse steps had never felt so crowded. Reporters jostled for position, their cameras creating a wall of lenses all pointed at the podium where Amara stood. Behind her, the massive columns of the courthouse rose like pillars of justice. She'd walked past them 1,000 times without really seeing them. Today they felt different, heavier, more meaningful. She adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. Some she recognized, fellow judges who'd come to stand behind her, community leaders she'd worked with over the years. The elderly attorney from the shopping district, Mr. Chen, standing in the front row with an encouraging nod. And behind all of them, regular people, hundreds of them. People who'd seen the videos. People who'd lived similar stories. People who were tired of the same thing happening over and over again. Amara cleared her throat. The crowd fell silent. "My name is Amara Williams, and I am a judge of the 5th District Court," she began. Her voice was steady, clear. 2 days ago, I was shopping in my own city when I was stopped, harassed and publicly humiliated by 2 police officers who assumed I was a criminal. Not because of anything I did, not because I matched the description of any suspect, but because I'm a black woman who in their eyes didn't belong in that neighborhood. She paused, letting the words sink in. A few people in the crowd nodded. Others had tears in their eyes. I could use this moment to talk only about what happened to me, about my humiliation, about my anger, about the bruises on my arm that are still healing. But that would be missing the point. Because what happened to me happens every single day to people across this country. The only difference is that I have a title and credentials that gave me protection. Most people don't. A woman in the crowd called out, "Tell the truth." Others murmured in agreement. "So I'm not here today just to share my story," Amara continued. "I'm here to demand change. Real change. Not empty apologies or officers being put on administrative leave for a few weeks before returning to work. I'm talking about systemic reform that addresses the root causes of racial profiling and police misconduct." She pulled out a folder from the podium and held it up. This document outlines a comprehensive plan for reform. It includes mandatory implicit bias training for all officers. It requires body cameras to be active during all public interactions. It establishes an independent civilian oversight committee to review complaints against officers, and it creates real consequences for officers who violate citizens' rights. The cameras flashed furiously. Reporters scribbled notes. This wasn't just a victim speaking. This was a judge proposing actual policy. I'm also announcing today that I'm filing a formal civil rights lawsuit against the Metropolitan Police Department, Amara said. The crowd erupted in applause. She waited for them to quiet down. "But any money I receive from that lawsuit will go directly into a fund to provide legal representation for people who've experienced similar treatment but can't afford attorneys. Because justice shouldn't only be available to those who can pay for it." More applause. Louder this time. People were standing now, clapping, some wiping away tears. Amara felt her own eyes getting wet but pushed through. "To the officers who stopped me, I want you to understand something. This isn't about ruining your careers or getting revenge. This is about accountability. This is about making sure you and every other officer out there understands that you cannot treat people this way, that everyone deserves dignity and respect regardless of their race or what neighborhood they're shopping in." She looked directly at the cameras. "And to everyone watching who's ever been profiled, who's ever been stopped for no reason, who's ever been made to feel like a criminal just for existing, I see you. I believe you. And I'm going to use whatever power I have to make sure your voices are heard." The press conference lasted another 40 minutes. Reporters asked questions. Amara answered each one with the precision of someone who'd spent years weighing evidence and making rulings. When it was over, she was exhausted but energized. The easy thing would have been to stay silent, The powerful thing was speaking up. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The police department scrambled to respond to her proposals. The chief agreed to meet with her, this time on her terms. City council members called asking for copies of her reform plan. Civil rights organizations reached out to collaborate. The story stayed in the news cycle, refusing to fade away like so many others before it. But there was also backlash. The police union released a statement calling her proposals anti-police and politically motivated. Some judges privately expressed concern that she was being too controversial. She received hate mail, anonymous threats, people saying she was making everything about race, that she was the problem, not the solution. Amara read every piece of hate mail, not because she enjoyed it, but because she wanted to understand the resistance. These were the people who needed to change the most. The ones who couldn't see the problem because they'd never experienced it themselves. 3 weeks after the incident, Officers Davis and Martinez were officially disciplined. Not just administrative leave, real consequences. They were demoted, required to undergo extensive retraining, and placed on probationary status. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than usually happened. The fact that their actions had been so public, so well documented, made it impossible to sweep under the rug. But Amara wasn't satisfied with just punishing 2 officers. She wanted structural change. She met with the police chief, city officials, and community leaders. Some meetings went well. Others were frustrating, full of people who wanted to maintain the status quo while pretending to care about reform. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A young officer, barely 2 years on the force, reached out to her privately. He was Latino, and he'd experienced discrimination himself before becoming a cop. He'd seen the videos of Amara's encounter and felt sick about it. He wanted to help change the culture from the inside. That conversation led to more. Other officers, black and brown and white, who were tired of the US versus them mentality, who wanted better training, who wanted to serve their communities without the toxic elements that protected bad actors. They couldn't speak up publicly without risking their careers, but they gave Amara inside information about how things really worked. About the unwritten rules, about which reforms would actually make a difference and which were just window dressing. 6 months after the incident, the city council passed the first wave of reforms. Mandatory bias training for all officers, body cameras required to be active, an independent oversight committee with real power to investigate complaints. It wasn't everything Amara had asked for, but it was a start, a real start. More importantly, 2 neighboring counties saw what was happening and adopted similar measures. Then 3 more. The ripple effect was spreading further than she'd ever imagined. Amara stood in her courtroom one morning, 9 months after the shopping district incident, and looked at the case before her. A young black man had been stopped by police while walking in a predominantly white neighborhood. No crime committed, no reasonable suspicion, just walking. He was suing for violation of his civil rights. As Amara listened to the testimony, she saw herself in that young man. She saw everyone who'd ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. And when it came time to rule, she sided with him, firmly, clearly, citing not just the law but the very reforms she'd helped pass. After court, a reporter asked her if she regretted what happened that day in the shopping district, if she wished she could go back and avoid the whole situation. Amara thought about it, really thought about it. The humiliation had been real. The trauma had been real. There were still days when she felt anxious going shopping alone. Still moments when she saw a police car and felt her heart rate spike. But she also thought about the changes that had come from it, the policies that had been implemented, the conversations that had been started, the young black girl who'd sent her a letter saying she wanted to be a judge too because she'd seen someone who looked like her stand up for what was right. "No," Amara said finally. "I don't regret it. I wish it hadn't happened. I wish we lived in a world where it couldn't happen. But since it did, I'm grateful I had the platform to do something about it." She walked back to her chambers and looked at the framed photo on her wall. Not the one of her family, though that was there too. This was a new photo, a screenshot from one of the viral videos the moment she held up her judicial ID. But she'd had someone edit it to add text at the bottom. It read, "Use your voice. Use your power. Make it matter." Every morning she looked at that photo. It reminded her that she could have stayed silent. She could have accepted the apology and moved on. She could have chosen comfort over courage. But she hadn't. And because she hadn't, things were different now. Not perfect, not fixed, but different, better, moving in the right direction. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Chen, the attorney who'd stood with her that day. Just got word. The Civilian Oversight Committee approved 3 more reforms. Your voice is still being heard. Amara smiled. Her voice, but also the voices of everyone who'd come before her. Everyone who'd been stopped, searched, humiliated, arrested, or worse. Everyone who'd been told their experiences didn't matter. Everyone who'd been dismissed or ignored. Their voices were being heard now. Finally. And Amara was determined to keep amplifying them for as long as she had breath in her body, because that's what justice really meant. Not just rulings from a bench, not just laws written on paper, but the hard daily work of making sure everyone, regardless of the color of their skin, could walk through their own city without fear, could shop without being profiled, could exist without being treated as suspicious. That was the world she was fighting for. And standing on those courthouse steps that day, sharing her story, demanding change, had been the first step on a long journey toward making it real. The work wasn't finished. It might never be finished, but it had begun, and that made every uncomfortable moment, every piece of hate mail, every difficult conversation worth it. Amara Williams had been humiliated by 2 police officers who thought she was powerless. Instead, she'd shown them and the whole world exactly how much power one person with courage could have, and she was just getting started.